Have you ever wondered how a continent that European powers basically ignored for over 100 years ended up becoming the most powerful nation in the world? Today, we're going to dive into the wild 423-year story of the United States. It's a journey from being an overlooked backwater to a global superpower. And the craziest part? It all started with nobody really caring about it at all.
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? For a whole century after its so-called discovery, North America just wasn't where the action was. The big European players, they were chasing gold and glory somewhere else. North America, for a long, long time, was pretty much an afterthought. All right, so let's rewind. Let's go all the way back to the beginning with those first European explorers and try to figure out why, for so long, they just kind of sailed right past.
Okay, when you look at this timeline, one thing just jumps right out at you, that massive gap in the middle. I mean, the English show up in 1497 and then crickets. For almost 100 years. They don't even try to set up a colony. And Spain, they came, looked around, didn't find any gold, and basically said, nope, let's head south. It's just wild to think that for the biggest empires on Earth, North America just wasn't worth the trouble.
And this right here tells you exactly why. Spain's goal was simple. Get rich quick. They were after gold, silver, and all the real treasure was down in Central and South America. That's where they built their massive empires. But England, well, they ended up playing the long game. They weren't just after a quick score. They wanted land. They wanted to build actual colonies. And that, my friends, is a totally different strategy.
And you know what? That slow burn strategy of planting roots, it actually worked. The colonies started to grow, and well, without much growth, conflict was pretty much inevitable. First, they clashed with another big European player, and then, in a huge twist, they ended up fighting their own parent country. So by the time we get to the mid-1700s, you've got two giants in the ring, Britain and France, and a showdown was bound to happen. So what was the secret weapon? Well, just look at the numbers. It's all about people. The British colonies had 1 million people. New France? Only 60,000. It wasn't even a fair fight. With that kind of advantage, the result was a foregone conclusion. Britain won, and boom, they took over Canada and everything the French owned east of the Mississippi. But here's the thing about wars. They cost a ton of money. So to pay the bills, Britain looked at the colonies and said, time to pay up. But the colonists, who felt like they did a lot of the heavy lifting in that war, were not having it. Their response was simple, powerful, and you've definitely heard it before. No taxation without representation. And that one single idea, that was the spark that ignited a revolution. And this is so important to remember. It's one thing to stand up and declare you're independent. It's a whole other thing to actually win it. So yeah, July 4th, 1776 was a huge moment, but it was just the starting pistol for a long, brutal fight. It took 5 more years of war to finally break free from the biggest, baddest empire on the planet. And get this, even after they won the war, the whole thing almost fell apart. Their first shot at a government, it was a total mess. You had 13 states that were basically acting like 13 tiny, squabbling countries. It just wasn't working. So, because they had to, they came up with something completely new, the Constitution. It was this radical plan for a strong central government that could actually, hold the country together. Okay, so now they've got a government that actually works, and the United States was ready to expand. And boy, did it expand. We're talking at a speed that was just staggering. It went from this little sliver of states on the coast to a massive nation stretching across an entire continent. And the first huge jump in size came from a guy you might not expect, Napoleon. Yup, that Napoleon. He had these big dreams of a French empire over here, but he had a more immediate problem. He was broke and needed money to fight his wars in Europe. So what did he do? He made what has to be the best real estate deal of all time. He sold the entire Louisiana territory for a measly $15 million. And just like that, poof, in one fell swoop, the United States literally doubled in size. This wasn't some slow creep across the map. It was an overnight explosion that opened up this enormous frontier for everyone pouring into the country. And believe it or not, that was just the beginning. What followed was this incredible 50-year dash all the way to the Pacific Ocean. You can see it here. Piece by piece, they bought some land, made deals for other parts, and fought a really controversial war with Mexico to get the rest. But all this expansion created a huge, unavoidable problem. With every new piece of land, the question was, is it going to be a free state or a slave state? And that single question, well, it was a ticking time bomb that was going to blow the country apart. And the expansion didn't just stop at the water's edge. This is one of my favorite weird bits of history. The US passed something called the Guano Islands Act. It basically said, if you're an American and you find an empty island covered in, well, bird poop, you can claim it for the United States. No, I'm not kidding. It sounds silly, but it's a perfect example of just how hungry America was for more territory. But underneath all this crazy growth, that ticking time bomb I mentioned was getting louder and louder. The bigger the country got, the uglier the fight over its original sin became: slavery. And it was this one issue that was going to push the United States to the absolute brink. And really, it boils down to this. In the North, more and more people saw slavery as a total moral evil, something that just couldn't exist in a country founded on freedom. But in the South, it was the engine of their entire economy, their whole way of life. These two ideas couldn't exist in the same country. There was no compromise left to be made. So when Abraham Lincoln got elected in 1860, and he ran on a promise to stop slavery from spreading any further, that was it. That was the last straw for the South. They felt like their entire world was about to be destroyed, so they left. They seceded from the Union, started their own country, and the whole nation just descended into the most brutal war in its history. Somehow, the nation survived. It was beaten up, bruised, but it was still one country. And what's absolutely wild is that only 2 years after that horrific war, what does the U.S. do? It goes right back to expanding. They bought Alaska from Russia for just over $7 million. And a funny little side note, the Russian guy who sold it said later he totally should have asked for more money. He knew America got an absolute bargain. All right, that brings us to our final chapter. The continent is more or less settled, the country is back together, so now America starts to look beyond its own borders. This is the moment it goes from being a big regional power to a real player on the global stage. And this sparked a huge debate right around the turn of the century. And the whole thing was summed up by the fight over whether to annex Hawaii. See, for a long time, the US tried to just mind its own business and stay out of world affairs. But now, with money and power spreading across the globe, a lot of people started saying, hey, maybe it's time we started acting like the big deal we are. Well, that debate got settled pretty quickly in 1898. There was a short, sharp war with Spain, and in the blink of an eye, the U.S. completely took apart the Spanish Empire. Think about that. In just a couple of months, America went from being a country that was a colony to a country that had colonies. A total game changer. And if you want to see this new, confident America in action, look no further than this. President Teddy Roosevelt wanted to build a canal, but Colombia, which owned the land, said no deal. So did Roosevelt just pack up and go home? Nope. He played hardball. He backed a revolution in Panama, helped them become a new country, and then made a deal with the new guys. It was bold. It's kind of ruthless. But man, it worked. When the Panama Canal was finished in 1914, it was more than just an incredible piece of engineering. It was a huge strategic win. It meant the powerful U.S. Navy could now zip between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, cementing America's place as a true two-ocean superpower. So there you have it. By 1914, this incredible, unexpected journey was pretty much complete. That continent nobody cared about was now a global powerhouse. But, and this is a big but, this all happened at a really dangerous time, right as World War I was kicking off in Europe. So the question wasn't, is America a world power anymore? The new question was, okay, now what?